Since 1998, the U.S. has been pressuring the Taliban to hand over al-Qaeda leadership in Afghanistan. The United States invaded after September 11, 2001. At first, a central element of the United States strategy was to rebuild Afghanistan's crumbling infrastructure. The Taliban resides in 80% of Afghanistan. The U.S. ended up at war with the Taliban. U.S. and Afghan forces as they try to beat back a Taliban resurgence that seen the group now control our contest using heavy artillery and mine clearance teams that dig out IEDs with their bare hands and control more territory in Afghanistan than at any time since the beginning of the war. When the U.S. started its war in Iraq, it deviated resources and labor from Afghanistan's battlefield, and the Taliban didn't miss the opportunity. To date, the most ambitious road construction project, known as the Ring Road, has seen more than $3 billion spent on its renovation, and it was never completed. After 20 years long, the war in Afghanistan is now considered the longest-running war in U.S. history. According to the United Nations, in 2017, over 10,000 civilians were killed or injured as a result of the conflict, and it fears this year's war injuries Afghanistan number will be considerably higher.
The statistics in this report provide credible data about the war's impact. But the figures alone cannot capture the appalling human suffering inflicted on the civilian population of Afghanistan. The findings show that the majority of civilian casualties resulted from suicide attacks, IEDs, ground engagements, targeted killings, explosive remnants of war, and the airstrikes. When we see civilians being deliberately targeted, you wonder, how long does this have to go on?
Many people have lost their lives and millions have been forced to flee their homes since the beginning of the war in Afghanistan. And the financial cost of this war is upwards of $1 trillion, according to some estimates. Former President Trump, who said his initial instinct was to pull out of Afghanistan, had a charge of heart when sworn into office, and instead of reducing U.S. involvement, he increased it. Current U.S. President Joe Biden will leave thousands of U.S. servicemen in Afghanistan beyond May 1st, a date agreed by his predecessor Donald Trump with the Taliban last year.
The president has been consistent in his view that there's not a military solution to Afghanistan, that we have been there for far too long. That has been his view for some time. Well documented, well reported on. He believes that, and he remains committed to supporting negotiations between the parties, which many of you may be following, are resuming next week. And he also believes we need to focus our resources on fighting the threats we face today, 20 years, almost 20 years after the war began.
The contingent of some 3,500 U.S. troops remaining in the Asian country for training Afghan security forces. Taliban insurgents had promised to resume attacks on U.S. and NATO personnel.
Joe Biden has just been elected. Do you think that could potentially change the situation?
Joe Biden لپاره د موږ مشران دا چې د ټرمپ تګلاره خپله کړه خپل عسکر وباسي د ملک نور د نه ځان خوږوي نه د خپل ملک اقتصاد خرابوي چې هغه بله چاره هم نه لري.
If forces were not withdrawing by the deadline agreed last year, and it is unknown whether they will comply with their warnings in the face of a review of the withdrawal plan.